All right, there we go. Hello, everybody. We are live. Welcome to the Pastrami Nation podcast. My name is Nolan Smith. I'm the editor here. And joining us today, we have, of course, fellow co-founder of Pastrami Nation, Jason Smith.
Hi, everybody.
We have our very own entertainment editor, Mr. Kevin Hoskinson.
Hey, guys.
And Kevin, can you please introduce our guest?
Yeah, our guest is freaking awesome. He's the host of the Cinemass podcast. Done some really, really great stuff. Mr. Brandon Treadway, thank you for joining us today. It's such
thank you for having me.
Yes.
I am
Thank you.
blessed to be on Pastrami Nation.
Yeah,
We're excited.
we love having you.
Thank you.
Well, and this is a different kind of episode because this isn't one of our normally scheduled episodes. But a little movie came out, and we really feel like we need to talk about it.
Just a little.
Movie.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I was thinking this right after watching this movie, and then right after Kevin watched it, he had the same thought. We need to talk about this.
We need to talk about Nightmare Alley. Wait, am I on the right podcast?
Hey, you're on the wrong podcast. Though I bet you it's a good movie. I still want to see it.
I thought this would be a West Side Story one. Sorry. See you later, guys.
Oh, yeah.
No, we are talking about Spider-Man No Way Home.
No way.
Obliterated the box office. Like took number 2 opening of all time. But that doesn't mean anything if the story isn't good and if the movie wasn't enjoyable. So let's go ahead and talk about just first impressions. What did we think overall of Spider-Man No Way Home?
I loved it.
Yeah, same. I really, really liked it. I'm ready to go see it again at some point so I can gather everything. But I really enjoyed it the first time around. Yeah. So as far as my initial impression, I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I really liked it. I have kind of a number of issues with it, or I guess questions that I think have kind of been weighing on me since watching it. That I think in the long term, I wonder how often I'll revisit this. But first impressions, as someone who has read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Spider-Man issues, my favorite superhero of all time, big fan. I really enjoyed watching No Way Home.
Cool. I think Nolan didn't blip out. I thought he blipped out for a second.
I almost did.
You almost did. Well, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, there's so much to this movie that I feel like, obviously, I think everyone I've talked to and everyone I know tends to have liked it, generally favorable opinions of it. But let's talk about some of the stuff that really got us excited about it. Some of the stuff that confused us about it. Like what are those things? So Brandon, actually, I'd love to start with you. Like what were, let's talk about it. So what you mentioned, you had some, minor things that you were thinking about.
Yeah. So I think the best place to start for me is actually some things that I really enjoyed, because I hate to come off the bat and be like, well, here's some of my issues.
Right.
As someone who has been a massive fan of Spider-Man since, one of the very first comic books I ever picked up when I was 7 years old was at the library. I picked up Fantastic Four and I picked up a Spider-Man book. And since then I have loved Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. And every single Spider-Man movie I have tried to go opening night. I love these movies. Well, most of them. And I love this character and I love reading his stories. My biggest question around this one specifically, and one of the reasons that I think that, like I said, I don't know how often I'll return to it, is that for me, I find myself returning more and more to the films that connect with me on a deep emotional level.
Right.
And for this movie, I think, especially on a first viewing, it is extremely satisfying to watch these things kind of unfold in a first viewing, where it's kind of, oh my gosh, it's Daredevil. Oh my gosh, it's, Andrew Garfield, Spider-Man. Oh my gosh, it's Toby, and all these different things and all these different villains. And it's fun to hear, some of the callbacks and the memes that we, recognize from the original films. Like, I'm something of a scientist myself. And, Toby great. Joking, complaining about his back, which is great because, he's got that great scene. I think it's Spider-Man 2. My back,
right.
So there's a lot of great callbacks. But what I found in movies that do that a lot is that I find them harder to return to, because while those things are really fun and I connect with them in an initial viewing, over time those things don't necessarily connect with me on emotional level, because they're tied to the emotional connection that I have with the previous films. And so what I was thinking, what is the thing about a lot, especially the first two Raimi movies, that I think what makes us connect to those films so much? I think that widely those two are probably regarded as, I would say, in just about everyone's at least top 3, maybe 5.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Spider-Man movies, and Into the Spider-Verse as well. That one connected so quickly with fans, and the question is the question is why, and the answer is that thematically the themes of those resonate with us on a deeper level, in the same way that like Star Wars resonates with people on a deep level because of the themes that it harkens to. So I started kind of thinking through what are the themes of those first two movies, especially, and also Into the Spider-Verse, which has some ties obviously to this movie. So the first Spider-Man movie, plain and simple, with great power comes great responsibility. Very, very blatant, clear theme in that movie. The second movie, I think, is an interesting one that and one of the reasons I think that movie kind of resonates more with people is that in that one you have Peter and Spider-Man, and he's trying to separate who is who. When am I Peter? When am I Spider-Man? And what he ends up discovering by the end of that is that with that great power and great responsibility, there is no difference anymore. Peter Parker and Spider-Man are one person now. And all of the consequences of Spider-Man now become the consequences of Peter Parker, and you need to accept that fact. And when he tries to reject that is when he loses his ability to be Spider-Man. And once he finally gives that up, he realizes how much he needs it, vice versa. Anyway, and that's when, he's finally able to connect with Mary Jane by the end, because he realizes that Peter Parker and Spider-Man together need to have Mary Jane. It can't be one or the other. And then even Spider-Man 3, I think, has really good themes, even though the movie is a mess, around anger and power and greed and revenge and forgiveness. And I think that movie, while it's kind of a nightmare in some places, does have some deep resonation. Now with this movie, I'm not sure what the theme here is to take away outside of how enjoyable it is to see some of these. And I think that there's moments and little lessons here and there, but I didn't necessarily pick up on a broad theme across this film that I see myself taking with me into future installments of Spider-Man and wanting to pick it back up. I mean, Into the Spider-Verse, right? Which I think is interesting. And sorry, I know I'm getting really long-winded here.
No.
But Into the Spider-Verse, I think, is interesting. And it's an interesting character study, because I remember when Deadpool came out and James Gunn said that whenever a movie comes out like this and explodes, he tweeted, he did this long post and he said, be ready for Hollywood to take away the wrong messages from that movie. So he was talking about that in with Deadpool, and he said, get ready for studios to want to create their Deadpool, right? And so you have these little things that popped up here and there. And he also referenced how Guardians of the Galaxy kind of had the same thing, where every studio wanted to have their Guardians. And I think after Into the Spider-Verse, the message that particularly superhero cinema took away was, hey, people are accepting of the multiverse. Let's start bringing in the multiverse. And we have it coming up with the DC universe.
Right.
And we now have it in the Marvel universe. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but like James Gunn said, I don't know if we understood why Into the Spider-Verse worked so well. And it wasn't necessarily because we brought in the multiverse, although that's exciting, but it's because Miles Morales as a character was so engaging and endearing. And that the theme of that film, which is there's no one way to be Spider-Man, and all these other Spider-Man from different dimensions teach him that. And he just needs to embrace who he is to be his best version of Spider-Man. That's a very, very powerful theme that goes beyond just Spider-Man. That goes to everyone, right? The best version of you is you. And even though we brought in the multiverse here, I didn't necessarily get that from Andrew and Toby's Spider-Man. And I wish we had gotten something a little bit more out of that. We did get some some very fun and interesting character moments from them, calling back to their specific stories. But I wish that we had gotten more of a deeper kind of thematic resonance in this movie, and I just feel like I missed that.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to jump in on that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I want to bring up something that Kevin put in his review that went up, because I very much agree with it, and it's about how we deal with pain. And I felt like the theme of it was, it's no longer the whole with great power comes great responsibility. I think it's more like with great pain comes great responsibility, because Tom Holland was kind of just this stupid, goofy kid Spider-Man for 2 movies.
Mm-hmm.
And, same thing, a lifelong Spider-Man fan. My first 2 comics were Spider-Man and G.I. Joe Special Missions. So, lifelong fan. And Tom Holland pissed me off sometimes because he didn't have that serious tone to him. I understand Peter Parker's a nice guy. He's a swell guy. He also had his uncle murdered. So he always carried that with him. And I felt like what this movie they gave us that moment so he can finally realize life isn't a joke anymore. You lose people. It's not like I'm going to just go have fun and me and Ned and MJ, who's not Mary Jane, are all going to go have fun. It's not true. Life sucks in real life sometimes. And I feel like they really hammered that home. Like, you screwed up and you got to live with the consequences. You have no friends. Nobody knows who you are. And live with it, kid, because you brought this on yourself. You lost your aunt. You lost everybody. So I really think the pain is the theme. And I think we saw Andrew Garfield really hammer that down, because he talked about, like, I was bitter and angry and I didn't want to see you become that. I wasn't the biggest fan of Andrew Garfield's 2 Spider-Man movies. I thought the first one was okay. Second one was no. However, Andrew Garfield in this movie was absolutely amazing. I felt like it's hard to say, but to me, he stole the show away from the other 2 Spider-Men in this movie in his scenes. He did such a great job, and I think it was the pain you saw in him, and you almost want to see, like, what those years were after Electro, right when he was going to go fight the Rhino. What happened after? Because it sounds like, and pardon my language, it sounds like his life went to shit.
Yeah.
But
downhill fast.
For me, this was the epic that Marvel has been wanting. I felt like this was more epic than what Endgame delivered, in my opinion. It hit on all levels for me. And same, I was there, midnight showings for Spider-Man, and I loved being able to see these Spider-Man come together. And when we left, I was telling my wife, like, I just want to see more Spider-Man movies. I don't hate Tom Holland, but I want to see more of the others. Kevin and Jason, what about you two?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, me? Okay.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
I loved it, but yeah, now Peter Parker got his, like, cold, hard taste of reality, and he's going to be somewhat more serious and whatnot. But at the same time, I can picture Samuel L. Jackson telling him, "Bitch, please, you went to space." Like, I could see that happening. And just, I loved how the whole movie went together. I loved all the old villains. I was trying to see who was coming through. Like, when Doctor Strange couldn't contain them, I spotted Scorpion and Rhino. Yeah. But there's also those things that, like, remember when, because Doc Ock was like, Norman, when they saw the Green Goblin and everything.
Yeah.
And then I'm surprised that, like, because it's still at that time frame then, Norman's still alive. Well, that was a young Tobey Maguire back then. I'm surprised he didn't say something like, Peter, you've aged. Because
that's true.
Tobey Maguire came out looking like Eminem straight out of 8 Mile or something. And I'm like,
yeah,
wow.
there's some interesting pieces, at least timeline wise. Because like, and also Electro was brought in, yet he didn't know who Peter Parker was in Amazing Spider-Man 2. In fact, he thought he could have been black. Right? He said, "I thought you might have been a black dude," and he's like, so I'm not sure why he was necessarily brought in.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
A couple of things they probably didn't fine tune, but it still worked really well. But just, I don't know. When the 3 Spider-Men got together, that was great. Like, just hearing them talk about all their stuff, and he's like, that's the only place it comes out of, right? Like about the webbing. The other 2 have to make theirs.
Yeah.
I'm like, geez.
Yeah.
Kevin, what'd you think?
No, yeah, I had a lot of great clips, but So initially, when I first heard like the project was happening and the whole, I kind of, like you were talking about James Gunn, and I started to think, I don't, because obviously there were the rumors about Andrew coming in and Toby coming in, and like you said, with DC doing their multiverse and all this stuff, like I felt like it was just something they were going to do because it was popular. It worked with the Spider-Verse, so they were like, hey, let's do this multiverse thing. It should work in live action. So when I first started hearing all the rumors and all stuff, I started to get a little panicky because I was like I wanted the multiverse to kind of stay special, I guess, in the animated form. I wanted, it has its own themes, its own lessons, and I didn't want them to take the wrong things from it and just kind of do it just because. But after watching it, I'm glad they did do it. And it was, listen, like we all know this could have been horrible. Like when you do fan service like this, like because this movie is a lot of fan service. Like it's like, hey, you remember these guys. But unlike Ghostbusters that came out earlier this year, like it had an emotional resonance to the story as opposed to just kind of being there to bring the nostalgia. You know what I mean? Like that's the way I felt about it. It was fan service done right, not perfect, but it was done right. Like it served the story enough to where it felt justified, and I didn't feel like I was just like watching something just to remember Toby or remember Andrew. I think it redeemed a lot of them too. I think it redeemed Andrew for me 100%. I wasn't on board. Again, I think he's a perfectly fine Peter Parker Spider-Man, and fine, not like perfect, but he's good. But his movies were unfortunately
kind of blasé,
kind of bottom of the barrel.
Yeah,
it's bottom of the barrel, man. Even though the second one, I watched it again, it has some really cool stuff in it, but it as a story and as a Spider-Man story, I just didn't care for it much.
That Green Goblin in the second one.
Oh gosh,
no.
that was horrible.
Yeah, that was
bad.
horrendous.
Just the first scene where he comes across Electro in the like Times Square, and that whole scene is done perfectly. The music, the soundtrack, like Hans Zimmer's score, the slow-mo, everything was just really good.
Well, there was really a lot of good points of the movie, but like you said, it just didn't come together. Like they had such a killer cast.
Oh yeah,
they had everything going for them, and then the story was just pure trash.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a fan of what they did with Jamie Foxx for No Way Home because I absolutely hated Amazing Spider-Man 2 Electro. And this one still had the pointy, mask kind of thing, like the comic one did. So
I love.
No, I agree. I mean, Amazing Spider-Man 2 could have been great, but so now I'm seeing a lot of things trending about give Andrew Garfield his third movie. Does the world need that, or does the world need more multiverse Spider-Man?
So I'm kind of, so they kind of, lack of a better, they kind of screwed over Andrew Garfield, right? Like the MCU, they bought, they said, hey, we're gonna do this with Spider-Man, Tom Holland, come on in, and they kind of, I felt like they kind of pushed Andrew aside, but I mean, almost deservingly so though, because I don't think Amazing Spider-Man 2, I know it performed well, but I don't think it was received very well.
It was not. And yeah, I rewatched it last week, and it ends almost knowing that it's over. It doesn't have like a next chapter, like at the end of this one, right? You have the web swinging, which I want to get to because that was, in terms of fan service, my favorite moment. But it ends with them like just at Gwen's burial, and it's like over. And I was like, okay, over. So this is done. Okay, we're moving on. Literally a funeral
for Gwen.
Yeah.
Right. And you can imagine, I mean, they were hoping that this could be a part of a franchise, So I mean, yeah, it does feel like a definitive end, but I do feel like that they were planning. Hopefully, I think Amy Pascal wanted to do more with the character and Andrew if Feige hadn't have come in and taken over. But
it's interesting that you say that, because I remember, I don't know if you guys remember this, when the first movie was coming out, the first Amazing Spider-Man, there were a lot of reports that Sony was terrified of what they were putting out, that they didn't really like it. They were thinking about scrapping it, and they ended up pushing it out anyway. And they were really nervous about the reception, and it got a fairly good reception, right?
Right.
I mean,
that.
it's a Spider-Man movie, so people are going to see it, and it got a good enough reception to garner a second film. That movie goes off the rails so many different directions.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that work incredibly well. I think the Gwen and Peter interaction, the fact that they were dating, really helps that movie out a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, their chemistry is killer, but I feel like that I guess duology was just almost doomed from the beginning. I think that they were like, we'll make a second one because we made money on the first one and we'll see what happens. But I mean, the second one just reeks of a lot of issues that feel like they're trying to close things down, weren't really investing in it. Storyline, Electro's motivations in that movie changed like 4 times.
Oh, dude, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I was watching it again. I'm like, what is this guy's deal? Like, what does he want? What's going on? Like, I don't understand like all of this.
Yeah.
But I do think so. I don't necessarily think that they should go ahead with an Amazing Spider-Man 3, but if they were at this point, I feel like they've redeemed Andrew enough to where if Feige is involved at all, I feel like it might be a decent story, because I'm not a huge fan of the Sony Spider-Verse right now. Venom, Morbius, I just don't. I'll watch it, but I'm not extremely excited about.
Get out.
What's that?
Get out.
Get out. I know. It's just.
Are you a fan of those Venom movies?
Oh yeah, I love those Venom movies.
I liked the second one more than the first.
Second one, I would have loved to see it like a little more brutal. You know, I felt like Carnage got killed off too quick. You know,
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. They like part 2. I did like a lot better than the first. But I don't know. I don't know if Andrew will ever get a second chance to actually be his own Spider-Man. And I do think if they do have Spider-Man go up against Venom, it's going to be. I mean, obviously, nothing's concrete at all, but I think Andrew wouldn't be a horrible choice. But
yeah, I think this movie was definitely his Spider-Man 3.
Mm-hmm.
This movie deals a lot, at least with his character arc, with second chances. One of the best moments in this entire movie is when he saves MJ, who's falling down the Statue of Liberty, where he gets that second chance to save Gwen. And we all know what's going on in that moment. MJ doesn't. And Andrew Garfield, I think, gives the best moment of the entire film, performance-wise, by just the way he says, "Yeah, I'm good." And you can just see how much emotion is there for him, knowing that he made up for the mistake that he blames himself for, that was fantastic. And so I think that's why I think that a third one would just kind of
kill it.
But also the Spider-Man that I think a lot of people are interested in seeing, which is that brutal Spider-Man that he talks about, I don't think that exists anymore. I think that him going back, he's seen 2 other Spider-Men now. He knows there's a better way. He even, I think there's a catharsis in that, the way in which he handled himself in the MCU versus, Earth 19999 or whatever we call it now.
Right.
Well, and we talked about Andrew Garfield, but what about Toby Spider-Man kind of alluded to like things worked out for him. He's kind of like the jolly dad, I think, at the end of it. Because he's a little older.
Pastor.
Yeah, he's a cool youth pastor.
Yeah, right. That was such a great line. But I think if we get to see more of Toby, we're going to see that as I don't know how many people are familiar with the Spider-Man Renew Your Vows storyline, but Peter's married to MJ, and they have a little spider daughter. And I think that could be the route they're going, because he looks like he hasn't been doing it, or if he's been doing it, not very often, because he is the first Spider-Man that we saw, in the cinematic U. So I think it would be cool to see him in that mentor role, because he's still the best Spider-Man, in my opinion. Like Tobey Maguire just owns Peter Parker's role. But I think we're just him like the Spider Family Man kind of guy, because he was the opposite of Andrew Garfield. He wasn't bitter. He didn't lose out. He got happiness. So I think people want to see that too. That's why I think a Spider-Man movie, and there was a comic called Spider-Man, a Spider-Man movie would be more ideal than, say, Amazing Spider-Man 3 or I know they're not even thinking about a Spider-Man 4,
Yeah.
but
Homeward Bound Spider-Man or something like that.
Spider-Man
Did you say
Homeward Bound.
Homeward
I wanted this one to be Spider-Man Home for the Holidays.
See,
Yeah,
I don't
right?
care. I don't care who's in that Spider-Man costume, as long as Cardiac is the villain for that one.
There you
I
go.
wonder if people know who Cardiac is.
They
Yeah,
better know
every time I bring
Cardiac
that up,
is.
nobody ever knows.
If they don't, they should. I need their address and.
I think it starts with Kevin Hoskinson.
Okay, cool.
I know who he is.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
So let me
got
ask
it.
you.
I
So
got
let me
it.
ask you a question about if they were to move in with more Spider-Man, because there obviously is something to be said around if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ... right? If we give people 3 Spider-Men, they're going to want more Spider-Men to go with it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the question is, and I think that's kind of the question we're asking is how do you go about doing that? And I almost think that the best direction, I don't know if there's a best direction. I would kind of prefer Spider-Man stay just, I like the spot that this movie leaves off at. It's kind of the one that I wish we had started at personally.
Mhm. Yeah.
But, you talked about Spider-Man, and at one point, the Spider-Man series was Peter and Miles. And so my question is, does it make sense? We know that Miles, at least in some facet, exists in this universe.
Right.
We do.
We saw his uncle played by Donald Glover
Donald
in
Glover.
Homecoming. And so does it make sense now for us to be introduced to Miles in some capacity in this universe?
I think so. I think it is time for it. I don't know though if Holland's Parker is the one to guide him
Right.
or be his mentor. I don't think he's not there yet to
He's
be able
still
to do
Spider
that.
Boy.
Yeah, he's still a Spider Boy, even though this did end, on a really, he's Spider-Man now. Like he's no longer, in the shadow of Tony. Like everything, he's the Spider-Man we know. I think we'd have to wait a little bit to see it. That's a good question though. I don't think this Holland is mature enough to, well, neither was, Peter B. Parker, but I don't think Holland Spider-Man is ready for that yet.
I agree.
But you do think it's time though, right? You think it's time that Miles comes into the MCU?
Honestly though, I kind of want to keep Miles in his own little special animated world. You know what I mean? Like I feel like he's such a fascinating character that like bringing him into the MCU, well, it's a good idea and I love to see him and I love his character. I just feel like there's so many other facets of it that will overshadow him in a weird way. And I feel like keeping him in the Spider-Verse, keeping him the center of those movies, he's kind of always in the spotlight and he gets his time to shine and we get to see him for the hero he really is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. Nolan, you made a comment around how you've kind of struggled a little bit with Tom Holland Spider-Man. And I think that one reason I've struggled with his Spider-Man so far, which is that it keeps being an Iron Man movie with Spider-Man, Iron Man movie with Spider-Man. This one, in some times, it felt like a Doctor Strange movie with Spider-Man in it.
Agreed.
So I think by bringing Miles into another Spider-Man movie, you run that same risk of Miles being overshadowed by Peter, which is what we've been waiting for Peter to be Peter and get his own movie. So I hope that Kevin, I know I posed the question and it's probably a trap.
No.
Kevin, I agree with you. I think keeping Miles in the animated kind of Sony universe or whatever they want to call it allows him to breathe and flex his muscles in a way that is more beneficial for his character. And then, 5-10 years down the road when we're on the 84th Marvel movie, then we can, bring him in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Now, who would you guys cast as a Miles Morales if, say, they absolutely said, no, we're doing live action,
Oh, man.
Good luck.
Oh, I've got mine. What's his name from Stranger Things? I can't remember the guy's name on that show, but I think he'd be a great Miles.
I think he would be great. I mean, I would think, Donald Glover like 10 years ago, maybe.
Right.
I think he would have been perfect. But I know exactly. Yeah, I think he would be great. Stranger Things. What about you, Jason? Do you have any ideas?
No, you'd have to jump too far back. Like, no, that's a
Yeah.
tough one.
No, I hear you. So Brendan, you have brought up so let's talk about some of the moments that were just, I guess you could call them iconic. I know the movie's only been out for a weekend, but some of the most, striking images and the things that you think about when you first watch this movie, the things you think about when you think about this movie. And you brought up the scene at the end when they were swinging together.
No, actually, that's not the one I was thinking of. That's a good one, though.
Okay.
So the moment for me is actually the very, very, very end of the movie where Peter's swinging on his own with his new suit, which is the original suit that we all love.
That suit is so cool, yeah.
With the kind of glittery blue on it. Oh man, I was so in heaven watching that. I mean, in terms of fan service, my favorite stuff in even the Raimi movies and some things that I missed with, I thought was executed rather poorly actually with the Andrew Garfield movies was the web swinging. Right. In the Raimi films, Raimi treats the web swinging so sincerely and passionately, and he gives this kind of regality to it where it's almost sacred. This moment where these moments where Spider-Man Peter is on his own, where he's almost this god floating above the mere mortals below him. And in the Garfield movies, it kind of turns it into like this web swinging / crawling acrobatics through the air, which is kind of fun on its own, but you lose some of the like majesty of it. And I think that they've done a pretty good job here, but I think that final sequence was so well done. It was beautiful, but I also, back to your point, I did love the three of them swinging around, kind of doing their own style of swinging. There was the one shot where they both are like kind of silhouetted by the moon, and they're all kind of doing their individual version of the spider crouch. Yeah, that was the one moment that got a real fist pump from me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like that moment, and then they land on the Statue of Liberty, and it's just like, obviously in the trailer they edited all that out.
Oh yeah, sure.
And it just like, but watching it definitely. But I know exactly what you mean with the swinging thing. Like that was one of my biggest kind of annoyances, I guess, with Andrew's duology and these movies, is they didn't really treat the web slinging like it. In this new trilogy, I can't think of any moments where there were moments where he was crawling on walls and figuring things out and stuff like that, but there wasn't that kind of iconography with it, I guess, that the Raimi brought to it. Like that's one thing I think about when I think of especially Spider-Man 2, was him just swinging through New York fighting Doc Ock. Like those fights, like
or him swinging with the helicopters flying around and coming down. Dude, it's a gorgeous way to end that movie.
Epic. And I can't think of any, I hate to say it, other than this movie, I can't think of any. When I think of the Holland trilogy, I think of them as a whole. There's no particular moments that I could point to and say, hey, like that's why you should watch that movie, if that makes sense. Like there are moments throughout, but it's Raimi's trilogy, I could point to a million things, and all three of them, even Spider-Man 3, there's some really, really good stuff in there. But this trilogy, I never felt that with anything they did. Like there's no iconography that I could point to and be like, hey, this is why you need to watch this movie. Except for like, this last one when they're swinging through, like you said, with the moon, and they're all doing their spider pose and they fall on the Statue of Liberty. Like that's the moment right there that I could be like,
I think that's more of an indictment of John Watts as a director, though.
It is.
I think that he, unlike Raimi, who is such a director's director, right? Like that guy, his fingerprints are all over those three movies, and it feels like a Raimi film. The John Watts movies, this Spider-Man trilogy, there's, like you said, there's nothing I can like point to where I go, oh, that's the sauce, right? Like that's what I come here for. Except for some of the, fan service that we really enjoy out of this movie. Right. I rewatching Homecoming, there wasn't a moment where I go, that's right, I'll love that. There wasn't a moment really in, except for the scene in Far From Home where he's in Mysterio's illusion,
That
which
was cool. Yeah.
arguably the best scene, maybe even of all three movies for me. But outside of a couple of little things, there's nothing where I go, that's the sauce I want all over my Spider-Man movies.
Right.
Whereas with the Raimi ones, I mean, I think in my review for Spider-Man 2 a couple years ago, I said, you could give me a 2-hour movie of him swinging and I'd watch it.
Yeah, and that's what Raimi does best. He really brings his touch and his style to it. Is Nolan still with us? Can't hear him or see him.
Should be, yeah.
Okay, I can't see your video. Your video's frozen.
You're frozen.
Oh, okay, I'm still here.
Okay, good.
I do have an iconic moment out of the new movie. It would be, it's two moments, and it's the Green Goblin battles. So it's the first one where he literally beats the crap out of Peter Parker.
Yeah.
So brutally. And then the flip side of that, to where Peter just pounds this guy. I mean, it really, really hits home that Green Goblin is his arch nemesis. Like, this is a man that in every universe has taken so much from him, and this is no different. You know, he took May this time. But William Dafoe just owned the role. I read that he wouldn't agree to do this unless he was allowed to do his own stunts.
Yeah, that's what I was reading too.
And so,
That's
I mean,
great.
he just owned it. I can't see someone else pulling off Norman Osborn. Right now anyway. That could change. But he owned it so well, and I love those scenes where I think Peter really realized that, well, I mean, I got nothing. Like, this guy just beat the living crap out of me and took off, and I can do nothing about it. Until he lost something. And then it's, I want to kill him. But to me, that was the show stealer. Of course, I love seeing Doc Ock, though. Just seeing Doc Ock. I mean, Alfred Molina is my favorite Doc Ock in anything. In comics, in the animated series, he is the best. He is the scariest. And it was a real treat to see him. If I had one negative thing, I'd say the lizard looked kind of goofy, and not very threatening.
Do you think it was better or worse than the first one?
I think it was a little worse for the face. He just looked creepy. Yeah, because Sandman was good too. Thomas Hayden Church is awesome.
I love Sandman. Yeah, Sandman.
That was one of the best portrayals of Sandman we've seen, was Thomas Hayden Church. So it's so cool to see them bring that back, because he owns the character, he looks the part, and Sandman's that guy that walks the fine line between, am I a good guy or a bad guy? And he did it again here.
And he has that, Thomas Hayden Church has that look that fits, like he's this villain from, like, Sandman's from the 40s or something, when his first origin, or
right?
Yeah, Spider-Man 3
look nailed,
Yeah, with that striped shirt.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely. No, yeah, I definitely think. What did you guys think of the? Were you guys at all expecting the Matt Murdock cameo?
I loved it.
I was. I thought it was great, but it got overshadowed so quick. But it was awesome.
What do you think?
I was trying to catch some other things. Like there was a room. Was it Doctor Strange's room or whatever? Where they were in that, like, lab. Remember those knives on the wall? I was trying to see what those were. You guys remember
the crossbow and all that? Yeah.
They were in like a display on the. I was like, whose are those?
I think that was actually a that was actually, I believe, in a transition scene over to Ned's grandma's house. Where those are ceremonial knives from Filipino culture.
Nothing
special.
Yeah.
Or maybe it ties in somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw them and I was like, oh shoot, I've seen a lot of those in my day. So,
that's awesome. Yeah, I thought that whole scene at Ned's grandma's house was great too. Obviously, that's the first time we see when Andrew and Toby come through. What were your guys' reactions to that? Were you guys, so obviously we knew, like, a really, really probably the worst kept secret in Hollywood that they were in it, but there was still that slight, like, I'd say 2% possibility that they weren't going to be in it.
Yeah, the news blew that for me all over. Like, stupid news ladies can't keep their mouths shut talking to Andrew Garfield. Like, yeah, you have a part in the upcoming Spider-Man movie, and then he just changed the subject on her, but I'm like, thanks, lady.
Oh,
You
that
just ruined it.
sucks.
They
Jeez.
couldn't just like let it go. They had said enough times like I'm not in it.
Mhm.
Like I wish that they had just everyone wanted to have the scoop of being the one to break that
Right.
story.
Yeah,
It's just so annoying.
damn Channel 4.
Yeah, but I thought it was a really cool way to bring him in. I wasn't sure how they were going to bring him in, and with Ned doing his little sorcerer thing, I thought was pretty clever, and bringing him in on accident, I thought was really cool.
That was cool.
Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Some that actually got kind of photos got leaked like 5 months ago by some dum-dums on Twitter. And I
Yeah.
stumbled upon one and I was like, yeah, that could be fake, and just moved on. Plus, I'd already figured it was going to happen. So,
Right.
I mean, you don't bring in all these villains from other movies without bringing in their Spider-Man, who we all know all loved playing the character. So, especially
Right.
after Into the Spider-Verse, I just knew it was going to happen.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah.
I've got a question. Do you wish that the endings for any of those 3 Spider-Men had been any different in this movie? For example, Toby gets stabbed at the end by Green Goblin, and
Right.
I was fully expecting for him to die.
So was I.
And have a moment where where I guess Tom Holland Peter is like, I can't believe this happened, and basically Toby tells him, hey, it was worth it to stop you from killing him. I was like, oh, this is the whole like thing, back to with great pain comes great responsibility. I know that you've suffered from this pain. I'm willing to sacrifice myself to protect you from the pain that can happen on the other side of that. And it didn't happen. They just like, I've been stabbed
glad it
before
didn't
and he
happen.
survived, but
yeah, he was like, I've been stabbed before,
yeah.
I think that would have been a real cool way to tie it all together, and it would have really, hit home there. But being such a big fan of Toby, I was shocked. I thought, that he's gonna die, and wasn't happy about it at all. So when he's like, I've been stabbed before, I'm like, oh, thank God. Yeah.
Hey, but how do you know
Spider-Man,
How do you know when he doesn't get back to like New York 2002?
He just bleeds out.
That was worse than I thought.
Oh, I got an artery.
Oh no.
That would be great. Oh man. But yeah, I mean, overall, it was a roller coaster of emotions. Yeah, the Aunt May scene, which was, it was unexpected, I think, in my opinion. I wasn't expecting it to happen that way, at least. I thought that was really, really well done. I thought the kind of interchanging her with Uncle Ben and the great power comes great responsibility line and all that stuff.
Right.
I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, it was a clever subversion. I thought
it was very clever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I got to ask, because, we always do, a scaled review, a score of what we feel like the movie would get. So I know for a fact, because I read Kevin's review, so I know what he would give. But feel free, everybody, let me know, out of 5, what would you give No Way Home?
Yeah. So obviously in my review, I didn't... I based it off of everything. It was the movie, what it was supposed to be. Was there anything that, did it live up, to the hype? Was it, was it what it was supposed to be? Was it what I was expecting it to be? And it was. There was a few small issues I had here and there, but I had to overlook those because the movie was just everything I kind of wanted it to be. So I gave it a 5 out of 5 just because I felt like it accomplished everything it set out to accomplish. It made me feel things, like I was like totally invested. I was in the story. It's that Marvel / Disney magic that they pulled it off, and they pulled it off really well, in my opinion. So I did give it a 5 out of 5.
Nice. Who wants to go next?
I will. I give it a 5 out of 5 too, just because it really nailed it for me. And I love the fact that, like, Doc Ock ends up being Peter's friend again. You know, like he's good. He's a good guy now. He's that Doc Ock that we saw at the beginning of Spider-Man 2, the one that was Peter's friend, that scientist, you know? And now he's in control. Like, and I don't know, that movie just touched me on so many levels. Doc Ock mainly, when that first scene when you see the car start moving on that bridge, and then all of a sudden you knew it was, you're like, oh shit.
Yep.
Spider-Man 2 vibes coming at you.
Here we go. Yeah, they also worked in some of the musical cues.
Yes.
Who did this one? I believe it was
is this Giacchino? Michael Giacchino?
Yeah, Michael Giacchino did this one too.
Yeah.
All right. So I will say I'm a tough reviewer.
Right.
For me,
I'm pretty easy.
Kevin's like, yeah, I've read your reviews. So here's my thoughts on this one. When I look to review it, is for me, this was just mouthfuls of candy. I like I said, I had a ton of fun watching this. And I was just stuffing my face full of candy watching it from start to finish, and I loved every second of doing that. But man cannot live on candy alone. And I wish that there had been a little bit more meat and potatoes in here that I think would, while there is some, I think that if there had been a little bit more, for me personally, like I said, I think had there been a little bit more thematic resonance. And I liked what you both had to say around with great pain comes great responsibility. And I think that's definitely in there somewhere. Didn't quite connect for me. I'm interested to see what happens on repeat viewings. But for me, I gave this a very favorable 3.5 out of 5. Okay. This is in my top tier Spider-Man. Well, almost top tier. I have it right neck and neck with Raimi's first Spider-Man, and just behind Spider-Verse and Spider-Man 2. So I very much enjoyed this one. Don't let the 3.5 fool you.
3.5.
No, and I agree with the placement on there, because for me, it's Spider-Man 2's. Well, actually, Spider-Man 2, and then I'm going to say No Way Home jumped over Spider-Verse for me on this. For this film, I got to give it a 5. I think I gave Ghostbusters Afterlife a 5 too. I know Kevin hated it. I had to bring that up.
I didn't hate it. I did not hate Ghostbusters Afterlife. I quite enjoyed it. No,
you did.
Boo this man.
He hated it. But for me, like I said, this was the epic that Marvel wanted. This gave us everything we could hope for. That's why you see so many memes of like expectations versus reality, and you have like this kind of buff rabbit and then like reality, and then it's like this massively hulked out rabbit, because that's, I feel what it did. Everything hit the high notes for me. You made the characters matter. You also made them less annoying with Ned and MJ, because I'm not a fan of them really. So I was really happy to see that they're look at me, I'm young and important, took a back seat, because this is a Spider-Man movie. This isn't an MJ and Ned movie. And I mean, down the road, I bet you Ned's going to become a villain, because he does in the comics. Spoiler. Very different character, but the same name. But this film it was so good. It was just so good. So many surprises. I was lucky enough to not catch any spoilers. Like everybody else, I had an inkling we were going to see all the Parkers. But I left there feeling like, this is one of the best Spider-Man movies or Marvel movies I'll probably ever see. And it's in my top 3 best of the year right now. I'm not finished yet, but I'm thinking like that, Ghostbusters and Jungle Cruise all mixed up in there, because that's, for me, I used to really break down movies by like, okay, well, let's talk about the acting, let's talk about the story. Well, let's just talk about, did I really walk out of there and enjoy it? Did I mind spending that $10 and saying like, this was worth it? And it was,
well, that's a $20 ticket for No Way Home for sure.
Yeah. And but like all of you said, the second viewing is kind of a must. Doing that this week, so hoping to catch more and more. But Initial, it's got to be a 5 out of 5 for me.
Hey, one thing though, you know how Tom Holland was like quick to, hey, we got technology, we can help all these guys get back to normal. You think he would have been so quick to like jump on that if he knew like how many people these guys have killed? Like,
Right.
Green Goblin's first scene, he blows up those was it like those congressmen
board.
or whatever? They're on that balcony in the parade.
Yeah,
Like,
the Oscorp
you really
board.
knew the monsters these guys were. Would you? Hey, let's get you back to normal.
Yeah, no,
Like,
that was.
he might have thought twice about that, maybe.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. And just real quick, first of all, I did not hate Ghostbusters Afterlife, so I need to get that there. Okay. Second of all, I had a lot of issues with it, but it was great. But I know you're talking about, judging it, not picking it apart, performances, things like that. But honestly, I have to say, I think that this movie is Tom Holland's like best performance as Peter Parker, hands down.
Agreed.
Like,
Totally.
it's
Yes.
probably one of the it was devastating. It was he just I don't think I've ever seen him act so hard in his life. I think he's an incredible actor, and I think this movie he just let it all out and just was incredible, like phenomenal in it. So that was one of the other reasons why I gave it a 5 as well. But
Yeah, I think more people would be talking about Tom Holland's performance if
Yeah.
Andrew Garfield hadn't absolutely dunked on everyone. I thought he gave the best performance in this. Some of the
did.
subtlety stuff. I mean,
he was hilarious.
just pound for pound, even outside of this, Andrew Garfield's just a better actor than the other
Oh,
three.
yeah.
And so it's kind of unfair. But yeah, great performances, I thought, from all three of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really well done. So just want to throw that in there. But I did not hate Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Well, let me throw one more thing in there. Kevin hated Ghostbusters. You
So
gotta
I've
believe me
heard.
on this. You gotta believe me. We really wanted to just have this chance to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. If you're watching, I hope you've been dropping the comments. I cannot see your comments, so I will read them once I am on steady internet. I'm outside of a McDonald's, folks. So yeah, I'm on their internet. Right. But I do want to thank everybody who's been chiming in. I want to thank, of course, Jason, Kevin. I want to thank our guest, Brandon, for being on here. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on here. And once again, where can people find your podcast at?
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, so I'm the host of the Cinemask podcast. We're on every platform. I haven't had any new episodes recently. Just, sometimes life gets in the way. I made a short film that kind of delayed things too. So, but we're starting back up in 2022. And yeah, just about every week we talk all sorts of movies. We've got interviews. We actually had Spider-Man Raimi trilogy star Ted Raimi on my show last year. It was a ton of fun talking to him. And
you guys got him on
we've got some Hellbender stuff coming up. If you haven't seen Hellbender, one of the best horror movies of 2021, hands down. So we got an episode coming out soon with them once that drops on Shudder. But yeah, you can find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google. I think Amazon Music has podcasts too. I think we're on there. So we're pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. The Cinemax podcast.
MySpace.
Yeah, we're on MySpace.
There you go.
Yeah, I've got it as my profile song.
Your top 5.
Yeah,
and your top 8 has to have Tom. Yes,
that's right. It's got Tom, Ghostbusters, Afterlife.
Oh, Kevin unfriended you right now.
Yep. Kevin just moved you out of his top 8.
Ghostbusters, Afterlife, Jungle Cruise.
We'll do an episode.
Yeah.
We'll do an episode on
Ghostbusters
specifically.
You know what he gave it? He gave it a 1 out of 5. I was like,
Afterlife,
1 out of 5.
Jungle Cruise.
Wow.
I'm just kidding.
We're doing an ectopod or something.
I'm sorry, Kevin. I had to.
No, it's all good.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, I got all blurry all of a sudden.
You did. You got all blurred.
I think it was your tears. I think they covered the camera.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was like, how did he know? I didn't even give that review and I gave it 1. I know.
love it.
But
All right.
again, thank you all again. Make sure you track down Cinemast, of course, and also make sure you find Pastrami Nation on every social media thing you can think about, including Pinterest. And we're also on Spotify and all the fun stuff, so you can find us on there as well. Visit pastramination.com. We do have our holiday gift guide going on. And big thank you to everybody who donated for our holiday toy drive we did for our Christmas giveaway. It was a great, awesome event. Jason and myself were over there, handed out toys. Apollo kept it going, and it's just been it's just so cool to do. So thank you to all who did that.
Apollo, yeah.
Thank you to Apollo, to Line Breakers, Bluefin, Jay Zoman, everybody who gave for that. We really do appreciate it. And I know the High Desert residents really appreciate it too. Looks like I'm getting kicked out of McDonald's because they turned the lights off on me. That sucks. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you all, and we will see you next week for our Best of 2021 episode. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, guys.